back to Sassy Jack Stitchery and Yonder Ways. We're going to talk about the third specialty stitch in our series this week, and it's called the Algerian eyelet stitch. And sometimes it's called the Algerian eye stitch, sometimes it's called just a star stitch. I've even seen it called a Turkish eyelet stitch. I think that the Algerian part of it became part of the normal usage on the name of the stitch because it was very popular in 18th and 19th century Algeria, and so it became known as the Algerian eye stitch or Algerian eyelet. And it's basically just an even number of legs that kind of dip back into the same hole in the middle over and over again. So we'll get to that and we'll practice that. Hopefully you've enjoyed the other two lessons, and clearly you can go at your own pace. You don't have to watch these videos on any time schedule. I do want to show you before we get started a really beautiful, excuse me, the name of it. And you can see through it because we opened up the back of it. We left the back of it open so that you can see it. And I may have to get something to put behind it so that you can see the beauty of it better. But this is the front. And the way these darning samplers were done, they would cut a hole in the linen and then they would repair the hole. And it was usually done for very beautiful costume or, you know, royalty, very affluent people, very high-end fashion of the time period is what this would have been used on, because clothing was not discarded at that point in time. This is the back. Oh, bad glare on that from the glass. But you can see the back is just beautiful. I'm going to grab something and put behind this so you don't see through it. You can see the whole thing. I'll be right back. Okay, let's start this again. So I've put a piece of foam core behind it so you can see it just a little bit better. This is the front, and you can see we've just tacked it to a piece of mat board. And this one's really pretty. It's got some needle lace in it, which is kind of this little square up here. And if you look at the edges, it's got some up there on the edge, all four edges of this one, which is why I wanted this one, the corners, to be out, which made it actually harder. See it down there? Harder to frame. And you see the hemmed stitch edge on it. And it's a little dirty. That's okay. But this one's 1745 darning sampler. And so, as I was saying earlier, and it's got some really beautiful, like this is a really beautiful piece of work there. As I was saying earlier, this one is 1745. And so they would cut a hole in the linen, which is what they did with these two needle lace pieces here. And then they would repair that hole in the linen. And so this is what the front looks like. I'm going to show you the back. So you can see what the back looks like. Just really pretty. Very, very pretty. Okay, and I show you this because I feel like the sampler that Jeanette did, it's just reminiscent of a darning sampler. It's just a really pretty sampler. It just looks like a darning sampler. And I wanted you to see what a darning sampler looked like. So that's that. So I hope you enjoyed seeing that. I do have another really beautiful one, which I'll show you in another lesson. So we are getting ready to go to Nashville Needlework Market this coming weekend. So I wanted to get this lesson done a little bit early. It'll probably still take me until Tuesday to post it. They take a long time to get uploaded, so we'll, just have to deal with that. As I travel, I will try to catch up on all your questions and comments. It's easier for me to do when I'm sequestered in the car and I don't drive. My good husband does the driving for us. I mean, I do drive. Trust me, I drive everywhere, but I don't have to drive to market. He drives us to market and back. I hope you are all doing well. I hope you're enjoying the lesson. We're still shipping out books. We got over 60 books in this past week and shipped them all out. I think close to 70 something. And shipped all those out. So I know some of you now have your books. We're still working on all the banding and stuff, but again, it's not a race. You can just, yeah, so just, when you get to the lesson, you get to the lesson. It's not a race. Just go at your own pace. And, if you do have questions, please send them to Sassy Jack Stitchery at sjsclasses@gmail.com, and I will try to get through all those as quickly as I can. We do stay pretty busy during the week, so it's not, it may not be as quick as you'd like, and I'm sorry about that, but we do run a pretty busy little shop here, so I try to use every little bit of spare time I've got to get through all those things. So just be a little bit patient with me, or feel free to call the shop. I'm almost always in here, and if I'm not with a customer, I do a lot of phone answering. So, and if you don't get us when you call, it's because we're probably on the line with somebody else. So feel free to call us back. But I hope you're enjoying it, and I hope you're learning some things. I hope you're learning a little bit about the different types of floss and stuff. I know we're using flower thread here, and you're using whatever you've got. We just got all the full line of Flotion this week, and so that would be another single strand that you could use. Some of you might be using the sulky threads, which I used on. I've got two versions going, the demo version, and then I have my personal one where I stitch the opening band and the closing band, and so I'm using sulky threads on that one. So whatever you're doing, I hope you're enjoying it. I hope you're stitching from stash a little bit, and anyway, let's get on with it. So I'm gonna go grab my kit and get my stuff ready, and we will go on to the next stitch, which is the Algerian eyelet stitch. We'll be right back. Hi everybody, so we are back and we are ready for lesson 3, which is the Algerian eyelet stitch. You'll notice that I rolled the back half of my banding up, and I just ran a ribbon through the middle. This is what I was talking about my friend Catherine did last week. So I just ran a ribbon through the middle, and I just kind of tied it. I didn't tie a knot up here. I tied like a slip knot where I can pull it and it'll come undone. That just kind of takes care of that for me. And I've got my hoop ready. You'll see that I wrapped it. I did a little video of the wrapping, and hopefully that video turned out. We'll have that posted for you to see. I just got tired of complaining about it, and figured you were tired of listening to me, and so I wrapped it. And you'll notice that I have put I'm a right-handed person, so I have put this screw on the left-hand side. Now, I put it at the bottom instead of at the top because I didn't like having that gap up here where my stitches are closest. But look, this is really tight. So it's so much tighter than it was before. I'm sure you can see how much tighter that is. And then I have the little peel holding it at the top for the stuff that we've already done. And this was the raised stitch from last week. And today we're going to start with the Algerian eyelet. So I am working with a 24 needle because that's about the right size needle for this banding. This is a 21 count. A lot of you are on 28 count, that's fine. Or if you're using a piece of linen and a different thread, use the right size needle for your linen and thread. This is flower thread. This is what I started with, and I'm still using it. And so, a lot of people have said, how did you do that? There's another video where I kind of show how I thread the needle. But I'm laid over my non-dominant hand, and I catch it between the index and the middle finger. My hands are really dry. I've been washing my hands a lot lately. So I catch it between those two fingers, the tail, and I wrap it over the top of that index finger. And I hold it with my thumb. I don't hold it really tight. It's kind of loose on there. And then I lay the eye of the needle right over top of the thread. And sometimes I'll turn it at a little bit of an angle to make sure that it's over the top. And then I kind of let it go, and I push up with my index finger, and I pull down with the needle. And it'll usually pop through there just enough that I can grab it and pull it through. So that's what I'm doing. And you can practice that. If you practice it, it might take you 10 or 12 times practicing it. But if you practice that, you will eventually get it. And then it's a life skill. I think it's fabulous. So I'm going to start with an away knot again. These eyelets, the one thing to make sure that you don't do is that you don't carry a thread over the center of that eyelet on the back. You want that hole in the middle to be open. You don't want to have anything going across the back of that. It's a really pretty stitch, and it's been used through, history as a beautiful decoration on all kinds of different things. And sometimes the holes in the middle are bigger, sometimes they're smaller, and that just comes from your consistency and your tension, how you're doing it, and really what effect you're trying to have. So the knot, how usually we start with the away knot way over here and we come this way. We're not going to do that today because we don't want to cover we don't want to have anything coming on the back of that eyelet. We're going to start down here on the left and come up with the away knot, so that we don't have to worry about it being caught up in our eyelet. And this eyelet, each leg is going to cover 2 threads, and it's going to have 8 legs, and each leg will cover 2 threads. And we still want to keep our 1 thread margin from the left hand side. We want to leave 4 threads margin from the raised stitch that we did above, or I do. You may have a different margin, and that's okay. You can leave whatever margin you want, but certainly you're leaving 1 thread margin on the left side. And then I have left 4 threads between each of my specialty stitches. So I'm going to count down 1, 2, 3, 4. That's where I want the top of this stitch to be. Now, each of these raised stitches, there are 8 legs, and each leg covers 2 threads. From the top of the stitch to the bottom of the stitch, it covers 4 threads. 1, 2, 3, 4. So if you're going to be looking at your book and following along in the book, you're going to be looking at page 11. And the Algerian eye stitch, I might have said the raised stitch, but I meant the star stitch or the Algerian eye, is covered on pages 10 and 11. So I'm at the upper corner of where I want this stitch to end. I actually want to start in the lower corner. I know if you're looking at the book, it shows you starting with leg number 1 in the middle on the left hand side. And that means you would kind of finish coming up on the far right. We're going to be traveling from left to right to do this stitch. And then one important thing about this stitch is that you don't cover up the hole that you're going to be making in the middle. And so to make that a little bit easier for us, I want us to start from the bottom left. And so we've counted down 4 threads for my margin from the last stitch above, which was the raised stitch. And now I want to count down 4 more threads because I'm going to start in the bottom left corner. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, and this is the first part of the Algerian eye, leg number 1, but let's go back and recount. 1, 2, 3, 4. That's the top of the stitch, and that leaves me a 4 thread margin, and I am 1 thread over from the far left. Now, because I want to start in the bottom left, which is not the same as the picture in the book, she's starting from the center, Jeanette is, but it's just easier for me in my stitching if I'm at the bottom left, because I'll finish down on the bottom and I can come over and start, and I'm not as worried about covering that hole. I have counted down 4 threads. 1, 2, 3, 4. This is where I'm going to start. So now to get to the center of the stitch, I want to cover 2 threads. So I'm going to come over 1, 2 threads, and up 1, 2 threads. And I'm going to go into that hole, and that's going to make a little pool. Now, the more you pull this eyelet, the more of a center hole you'll have. And that's really a matter of personal preference, depending on, how you do that. And which way you go around the eyelet is up to you. I'm going to go clockwise around the eyelet. So my second stitch, I'm going to count up 2 threads from where I started the last one. So here's the hole where I started the last stitch. Now I'm going to go up 1, 2 threads. So the second leg is going to start right there. And then I'm going back into the same center. Right? The third leg, which is going to be at the top of the stitch, comes up 2 threads from where I started the second one. 1, 2. Okay? Now, if you're going to be pulling, and we'll get more into that, you don't pull as you go into the center of the stitch, into the pool. You pull as you're coming up on the next leg. You get it taut. Make sure you're not creating a knot on the back with some extra thread, but you actually don't pull it until you come up here. So just to be consistent, we're coming over 1, 2 threads. And we're at the top of this row. And let's just double check our margin. I had 4 threads. You may have more. 1, 2, 3, 4. So I'm still in the right spot. And if you put the name of your stitch up there, you've got that going on, but you can figure out your margin. Okay, so that was 4 legs. This is the 5th leg. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I counted over 2 threads. 1, 2, and then I'm back into the pool. Okay. And then I'm coming down. So I'm going to come down 1, 2. Right? And if I'm pulling on the up, not on the down. And I counted it, I just went into the middle of the pull. So to get to the next leg, I count down 2 threads. 1, 2. Right? And if I tug it, I'm tugging on the up, not on the down. And then the next one is just going to come over 2 threads. 1, 2 threads. Right? So this is the 8th leg. Let's count them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. We're on leg number 8, and it just goes into the center of the pull. Okay? So, now, let me get this little white card so you can see. This had some twill tape on it. I want you to see, I don't know if you can see that hole that's in there, or you see it better on the black, because everything around it's black. This hem stitch makes it kind of hard to see. But there's a pretty good hole there. So depending on how you're feeling when you're doing this eyelet stitch, you may have a big hole, you may have a little hole. And, you know, that speaks to consistency. If you're going to do a whole bunch of eyelets, like in a row or something, you kind of want to do them in a sitting if you can, because they'll look different if you do them on different days. They might have more or less of a hole, unless you've learned to manage your consistency with your tension, because how tight you pull it is how big that hole will be. So let's think about where we are on the back. Our 8th stitch came up here and went down into the hole. So right now our thread is sitting on the back right underneath this hole. I don't want to see that thread through that hole ever. And so to keep that from happening, I would never go from the hole up, because then I'd cross over the hole and you would see that thread on the back, and you don't want to do that. So I started down here on the lower left because I want to stay starting on the bottom. I want to keep this last thread when I go to start a new stitch from ever being seen on the back. So that means I don't ever want to be in a position where I'm having to figure out, you know, how to avoid that hole. I'm just going to stay along the bottom. So right now I started here and went into the hole, and I ended on the last leg here into the hole, right? And I also want to give good tension to that last leg. I don't want it to be kind of loose. So I'm actually going to just come up right here beside it, which creates, I think, really good tension, right? So this thread came up here, went down there, and it comes up here. Okay, and so on the back, you will not see that thread crossing over that hole. Right? It's all staying down on the bottom. And so now I want to start the next stitch. So it's over 2 threads and up 2 threads. So 1, 2, 1, 2, and down into that hole, which is going to be our center hole. Okay? And then the next stitch, the next leg of this stitch is going to just start up 2 threads. So 1, 2 threads. And it's kind of where you're just going to be starting in a dirty hole on that side, because that's where you did your last stitch. Okay. Remember, we're not pulling on the down. If you pull, you're going to pull on the up. And then you're going to come up 2 threads. 1, 2. This is a pretty straightforward stitch, I think. The only thing you really have to think about is where you're starting and ending, so that you don't cover that hole. And then, again, here you're counting over 2 threads. 1, 2. You're just staying along the same row. Okay? And then the next one is 1, 2 threads over, and this is the corner side of this eyelet, and then you're going down. And again, you're not pulling on the down. If you pull it, you're going to pull on the up. So I would pull it right here. Okay, and I'm not pulling crazy hard because I don't want big wonky holes in the middle. This is a real pretty stitch if you have something on that you want to show through the back. Like if you could pull them tight enough to run a ribbon through it. I've seen that done, and that's pretty. And then you have to really pull it, and you have to be using a pretty loose weave linen. for us, we're not doing that. But if you had like you did a stitch sampler or a band sampler, and you want to show these holes, and you could do it on this one at the end if you wanted to. You could put something with some color that would show through the holes as the back. And so you could either use another piece of fabric or a piece of mat board if you're going to frame it. If you're just going to use it, you could put a piece of wool back there. For us on this, I really want you to keep it open on the back so you can see how you did the stitch. But, if you were doing a sampler, like some of the Victoria samplers or something like that, you could frame it with something that would show through those holes, and it would just be really pretty. Okay, so I came down 2 threads and came up in the corner back into the hole. And now I'm on the last leg of this stitch. I'm coming up right in the middle, back into the hole. Okay, and this is where I'm thinking about, okay, where do I go next? I am consistently on this stitch going to come up down here at the corner. Now, if you were doing something where you had eyelets, maybe you weren't starting right beside it, maybe you were starting down here, or you were starting over here, you would go to the back and weave through the legs so that you stayed away from that hole. Wherever you go next, you don't cross that hole. So you can travel where you want to by weaving through the legs on the back and avoiding that hole. So you would just make sure that you did not cross that hole. And on a lot of antique samplers, the letters are done in eyelets. So you'll see that a lot. So once you get your hole in the middle and you figure out you're just going in this little rectangle over 2 threads, you're not really having to count a ton. But I'm going to keep counting for you so that it's in your head. So from this corner stitch, we're going to come over 1, 2 threads. And again, I'm using my finger on the back. So my middle finger, it's almost always my middle finger is always guiding that needle and pushing that needle around to get it to where I want it to be. And I'm feeling of the thread back there to make sure that there's no extra thread back there that could create a knot or an issue. So again, over 1, 2 threads and back down. Now you see, we could do this eyelet, and we will before we're done with this, where we covered every thread, and it would have more legs to it. So right now we're just doing 8 legs, which is pretty normal for an Algerian eye. Okay, so we're on the last leg, and I've skipped 2 threads between each leg, and I'm going into the pool, and I'm only tugging just enough when I go down just to make sure I don't have anything caught on the back. And then I'm coming up right here in the corner again. Come up 1, 2 threads, over 1, 2 threads. You can count those 2 threads over any way you want. And the reason that I am going clockwise is because I'm traveling to the right. If I were traveling to the left, I might be going counterclockwise. But I want to end closest to the side where I'm going next. And so I'm going clockwise so that I end right here and I don't travel as far to the next stitch. If I went counterclockwise, I would end up here, and then I would have to deal with that hole. I'd have to weave under on the back to get over there. So, a little bit of thought goes into which way you travel. And it's not going to always be the same. It's going to be dependent on where you're going next. And so you saw me do those 3 real quick because I knew I'm just starting at the same places where these other legs ended. Now on this one, I'm going to count over 2. So 1, 2. Right? And I'm pulling on the upside and I'm back into the pool. And then 1, 2. I'm in the corner now, pulling on the upside and back into the pool. 1, 2 coming down, pulling on the upside, back into the pool. And I'm not pulling a lot. I'm not really pulling any more than I normally do. Down 2 threads to the corner and back into the pool. And then over 2 threads to get this last leg, which is number 8, and back into the pool. All right, my thread's back here. So this is what I'm talking about. If I needed to start up here to do this next stitch, I could not just start up there. I would have to turn this over and weave underneath these two legs to get up here. Because you got to do two things with these eyelets. You have to secure the stitch you just made. You want it to be nice and clean and tight on the back, and you need to not cover the hole in the middle. So we're going to carry on with our little row and practice consistency. All right, so up 2, over 2 to get to the center. Up 2 into the center. And again, I'm using my middle finger on the back. Up 2 into the center. Okay, now I'm going to go across the top, over 2 threads, and you can count them with your needle if you need to, into the center, over 2 threads, 1, 2, into the center, down 2 threads, 1, 2, into the center, down 2 threads, 1, 2, into the center. All right, coming up on the last stitch, you're going to go over 2 threads, 1, 2, tug on the upside into the center. And again, we're going to start down here in the corner so that we're getting a nice tight end to that last stitch, and we're not covering our hole. And then we're going to count over 1, 2 threads and up 1, 2 threads to make the center of the next eyelet. We're going clockwise, so we're going to go up 1, 2 threads into the center, up 2 threads into the center, over 2 threads into the center. On the top, we're coming over 2 threads. This is the corner of the stitch, into the center, down 2 threads into the center, down 2 threads into the center. So as you're doing this, this is a time for you to play with your tension a little bit, figure out what works for you and what you like the look of, you know, and play around with it. The harder you pull, the bigger the hole. The less hard you pull, the less the hole in the middle. So we're just going to carry on like this till we finish out this row. It's just a real pretty thing. These eyelets have kind of a delicate look to them. It's a nice, pretty little stitch. You see, I'm not having to tug at my fabric this time. It's staying really taut because I wrapped that hoop. Okay, on the bottom corner. Into the pool. Come down here. And I want you to still, you know, if you cross over that hole in the middle as you're going to your next stitch somewhere, because if you're doing something in a different, where you're not going straight over to the right, you'll see it. You'll know right away, oh, I shouldn't have done that. And if you do that, you probably should take it out. You know, I'm not a big proponent of pulling stuff out, but if you do find that you accidentally cross over the eye of your eyelet, which is what that hole is, you will want to take that out and fix that. It's just not pretty when that happens. And again, I just want to show you where my finger was on the back. I'm constantly pushing around back there. And this is what the back looks like so far. So I'm constantly guiding my needle back there. Okay. So we're coming up on the last leg of this one. And this is another one that's really pretty with an overdyed thread, which we will use in our final stitch to show you. how that works. Okay, so we're down in the corner, up 2, over 2, and that makes the center of this one. I hope you guys are feeling good about this one. I hope you're feeling good about the series so far. This is the 3rd stitch. I have certainly been enjoying it. And I, again, really thank Jeanette for the great instruction manual that she published for us to use. Okay. So, 1, 2. And I think the beauty of using a small hoop like this is that you can get your hand right down there where you need it to go to help you guide these specialty stitches. Guide the needle to get them in the right spot. Okay, 1, 2, and into the pull. Over 1, 2, and into the pull. And I'm not counting this as much as I did the others because it's 2 threads all the way. But I am trying to remind you of the important things, which is not to cover the hole and to think about your direction that you're going with these so that you can end in a place that is most convenient to you to preserve the eye, which is what you're really trying to do. You want to keep that little eye open. Okay, 1, 2, back down into the eye. Make sure that you don't overshoot that eye and go down somewhere else. You need to go through the eye every time. Okay. 1, 2, 1, 2. And, you know, that directional thing and weaving the threads on the back, that gets really important when you are doing lettering. Like, so if you're doing this on a sampler reproduction, or you're making your own sampler and you're doing some eyelets to do the letters, which was, again, very traditional in samplers, you really do need to think about where you start and where you finish. And you may even get to the point where you're planning a path and you're doing, you know, part of the letters. You're not doing the full eyelets, you're doing part of it and then coming back to it. And, you know, that's definitely a little more advanced in how you're managing the stitch. And so not anything for you to worry about right now, but just to know that there's a lot of cool things you can do with this eyelet. While it is a pretty straightforward stitch we're doing here, it can get a little more technical if you're using it to do lettering or other shapes. 1, 2, and down into the pull, and come down 2, and down into the pull, down. Ooh, did you see that? I meant to do that. So can you see what's wrong with that? I did not start in the right place. So that leg is off. So because I pulled all these stitches tight, I can just go into the pull and undo it and come back up. and I've freed up the leg. But I want to show you, if I had pierced a thread in there or there was something else going on, I wouldn't necessarily back that stitch out using my needle, because I might pierce the thread, or I might have already pierced the thread, and that can cause a knot. I would unthread the needle, and I would slide my needle underneath it, and I would pull it out that way. And that way you don't run the risk of piercing a thread. And then of course you have to rethread the needle. So whatever method you use to thread your needle with is fine. You know, you can practice my thing and learn how to do that and use it. Some people do it in the palm of their hand. I don't know how to do that. And so now I need to get out of that hole and come up here to where I was supposed to be. So just when you get cocky and think you got it down, you do something silly like that. And so hopefully you're watching what you're doing and you'll catch it before you get too far. And you can fix it real easy like I did. Okay, so we're getting near the end of the band for this first one. Alright, and again I'm just skipping 2 threads between each of these legs. Hopefully that's all making sense to you. So 1, 2, and then down into the pool. And come over 1, 2, and down into the pool. And then down 2 from where I did the last leg, started the last leg. 1, 2, oops. Down into the pool. And this is another reason I always stitch with a tapestry needle and not a sharp, because I don't like piercing threads. You see how often I almost I hit them. If I were using a sharp, it would just go straight through and pierce them, and I don't really, that weakens everything when you're piercing your thread like that. Alright, we're definitely going to get one more. We'll see how we end. 1, 2, 1, 2. I think we're gonna, might be spot on. Okay. And if you notice me using some terms that are British in nature, it's because I lived in London for a while. I worked over there for quite a while, and part of that time I actually lived over there, and so the lingo sticks with me. Okay, we're getting toward the edge, and we want a 1 thread margin, but you can see where this one ends up here. See that needle? So here's the 1 thread margin. It's kind of hard to see in some spots. You see it really well down in here, but it gets over close to this, whatever that is running on the side there. So I'm going to count over 1, 2 threads and come up, and I'm going to check, is that in line with the last leg of the stitch above me? And it is. So that still leaves me a 1 thread margin. It's a little hard to see right there, but you see it down lower. Jump into the middle of the pool. I'm going to come up 2 threads below it and into the pool. 2 threads below that. Now here you can see the 1 thread margin a lot better. You can see it right there. Now if you're on a 28 count, it might be a little different for you. And then the last leg right there and into the pool. Now you have to finish this thread. It's just as important on that last leg as it is on every other leg not to cross over that hole. So you want to make sure you've got this thread kind of taut down at the bottom, and I can either come up and over the corner of this, or I can go the other way. I am going to go back this way, and so I am going to run this thread underneath these 2 legs over here. Without piercing them. And so I'm just getting underneath, and I had pulled that pretty tight, and you may end up having done the same thing. Okay, so I went that way, so you can see that it doesn't cross this hole, and it's not disturbing that hole. All right, and that only went under 2 threads. I don't feel like that's real secure, so I'm actually, you could come up and round it around and run under the others, but I'm actually just going to stay along the bottom and bring it under the 2 legs of this one. You don't want to pierce their threads, and you don't want to, mess around with what it looks like on the front. So I don't think that's coming out. My stitching was so tight on that but that's not going anywhere. If you wanted to run it under again, you could. So that's the end of the first band of eyelets. It's pretty, isn't it? And if we look at the back, you can see there's nothing that carried over any of those, didn't disturb anything there. This is the thread that I ran underneath right at the end, but it's down underneath there. It's not hurting anything. Before we do the next band, I'll see if I can get something that's got some color on it that we can show that you can see the holes. All right, so I'm going to, and so we've got this way knot that we've got to deal with, and we want to do that before we move on to the next band. So remember, you just cut that off the front, right? And then you come back here and you thread your needle. And that's kind of short for me to do my finger trick with, although I might, because I don't know if I can see the eye to do it that way. Got it. Okay. So pretty short thread there. And I'm going to run it underneath. Remember, I'm not going to go over the eye. I'm going to run it underneath. And I'm going to run it underneath 2 sets of eyelets here, because I know that I want it to be secured underneath 2. Right. Okay. Pull that kind of down toward the bottom so I know it's not edging up toward the eye, and snip it. Alright, so that's done. It's not covering the eye. Got a pretty short tail on it. Yeah. And the front looks good. Alright, congratulations. That's your first row of eyelet stitches. Pretty straightforward. Okay, I'm going to rethread and come back, and we will start on the second row in a different color of the eyelets, and we'll practice some more. Be right back. Okay, so we're back. We're going to do another row of this stitch just like it is. And in fact, I think we might do all 3 rows like this. And then when we get to our ending little thing where I show you something different, we might do it a little differently. So you may want to tune in for that at the end as well. So we're starting with our red thread. I think it's important we practice this stitch. And so we're going to just come down. Again, we're going to count down 4 threads because I want to start at the same place. I want to start at the bottom left. So 1, 2, 3, 4. And you still want to leave your 1 thread margin, right? And I have put in a waist away knot down there. So you've got your 1 thread margin and your 1, that thread on mine is a slub. It's a fat thread. That's okay. 1, 2, 3, 4 from the bottom. Okay, and then I want to come over 2 threads, up 2 threads, and create the eye. And so I'm going to go right down through the center. All right. So now the next stitch, sorry, I pulled my cloth down some. Fix that. Okay. Okay. So the next stitch, you're going to count up 2 threads, and then you're going to go back into the eye. Okay. And then up 2 threads. Now you're coming in a dirty hole because we're underneath that first band, and back into the eye. And you want to, again, pull on the upside and not when you're going down. You saw me pull that down a little bit and it distorted it, so I had to fix it. Okay. And then you're also, see that? I felt that on the back. That's a knot. That's what your hand is trying to find on the back. You're trying to keep that from happening and catch it early so that you can fix it. And sometimes when you get these knots, you can just tug at them a little bit and they'll go away. This one's a little slip knot, so when you have a little loop like that, you can usually pull it and it'll come out, but I've pierced some threads there. All right, so that one's out. I've got a pierced thread there. We'll see if we can get that to come through without creating too much craziness. Okay, that's what happened. Our way knot came out. All right. So, that's going to be a problem for us on this eyelet. So I'm actually going to restart, but I want you to see this, so I'm going to leave all this in. But I'm going to cut this off, get rid of it. We pierced the thread on the back, so it kind of compromised its integrity. I'm going to cut that out because we're so early. I'm just going to pull it all out, and we're going to start again because I don't want that to happen. Now, if something like that happens to you and you've gotten a lot further than that, you just have to make a decision on whether or not you want to, leave it in there, the pierced thread, and just make sure that it's not something that's going to get a lot of wear and tear, so hopefully it won't degrade over time, or how you want to manage that. But for me in this situation, it was so early. We'll just cut it out and be done with it. Move along. So I'm setting up my knot for my away knot. Waist away knot, rather. Okay, we go again. That's okay. That's what your hand on the back is supposed to be doing. It's finding that stuff. Okay. So let's start again. I'm going to count down. I'm going to leave one thread margin on the left, count down 1, 2, 4 threads. That is not where I want to start. Okay, so let's get started again. I want a 4 thread margin from the, okay, so let's get started again. I'm going to count down 1, 2, 3, 4 threads, and this is where I start the next stitch. And so I'm going to come up in the lower left corner just like I did before, come over 2 threads and up 2 threads and create the eye. All right, and then I'm going to count up 2 threads on the left hand side, 1, 2, come up there and go in the center to create the eye. And I'm constantly checking on the back to make sure I don't have anything crazy. And then up 2 threads, and this is going to intersect with the stitch above it. I'm coming up in a dirty hole, 1, 2, and then back into the center. Okay. Now, as we go along the top of this stitch, we're going to be constantly intersecting with the stitch above, and that's okay. Keeps us from having to count. But if you want to count it, if you don't have a row above, you're going to go 1, 2 threads. You tug it a little bit on the up stitch, not the down. 1, 2 threads. One, 2 threads. And then count over 2 threads to get the last leg. That's the 8th leg, and into the hole. Now remember from where we did this before, we want to not cross over the hole, and we want to keep that last leg tight, which is why we went clockwise. And then we're going to just start over here for the next stitch. So we're coming over 2 threads and coming up, and then count up 2 threads and over 2 threads and go into the hole. And your second leg starts right there where that other leg intersects, and it was up 2 threads, over 2 threads to find that eye. You go back into the eye, and the last leg on this side starts up 2 threads, which is also where the other leg is, and then back into the hole. You count over 2 threads, which is going to put you with the center leg of that stitch above, and then back into the hole. Count over 2 threads, which will put you back where that leg from the stitch above is, and into the hole. And now you're coming down the side, so you're going to count down 2 threads. Remember, I missed that on one of my last stitches, and I had to take it out. And then back into the hole, and then count down 2 threads till you're in the lower corner, and back into the hole, over 2 threads, and back into the hole. Okay, and we're going to come back over here and start in the lower left corner for our next stitch, and then up 2 threads, over 2 threads to create the eye. This is a real pretty stitch when you get them all going. It's very pretty if you're using variegated floss. Again, you count up 2 threads to where you find that last leg and come back into the eye. And you notice that they're all they're lining up, right? They're supposed to. And you cannot skip around on these legs. You need to stay going clockwise or you'll end up accidentally covering up that eye, that hole in the middle. Down 2 threads into the eye. Down 2 threads and into the eye. Over 2 threads into the eye. And then we want to come back to this lower left corner. We're keeping this, see, this last leg, it went into the eye and then it came back over here. This is what's happening on the back. It went into the eye there on the top, and then on the back, it follows this leg on the top and it comes over here. And so that secures that thread and it keeps it away from the eye. So here we want to go up 2 threads and over 2 threads. Create the eye of the eyelet. So this is a nice little meditative stitch once you get your pattern going. And I'm just going over 2 threads every time. 1, 2, to make this 8-legged eyelet. 1, 2. And I'm using my finger on the back to make sure I don't get a knot back there. Okay. 1, 2, 1, 2. Should line up with the center of the stitch above, and it does. I hope this is feeling good to you by now. So we're just stitching now, every 2 threads, right? So up 2 threads, over 2 threads to find the eye. It's kind of easy once you've got another set in there because you're just, 2 sides of it are occupied, so it makes it easy. So now this one looks a little weird there. The hole's a little big for some reason. So I'm just checking that. I'm making sure that I'm coming up 2 threads. It would be the intersection of that other stitch. So you can make a mistake doing this pretty easy if you're just doing it visually. So make sure that you're paying attention so you don't get a wonky eyelet with a leg in the wrong place, like I did on the other one. I hope you guys had a good week, or whatever time period passed from the time you watched the last lesson. The original posting of these is about a week apart. I think there might have been 2 weeks between the first one and the second one, just because I was traveling. And if they take me a long time to get them uploaded, which they always do, but the question is how long. Could be an extra day in there. I think I might have found a solution for that, so I'm going to try it with this one. So we will keep getting better. I enjoy this. I hope you do. And I'm enjoying seeing the few that have been posted. I hope I get to see some more. So you can, I've gotten a few emails. I appreciate those. You can send them by email, or you can post them to our Facebook page, or you can post them on Instagram. Any of those are great. If you post them on Instagram, maybe you can post them with the hashtag SJS Learning Stitches or something like that, so that we know it's Sassy Jack Stitchery Learning Stitches. I think that would be awesome. Look how pretty this is. And you can imagine if you were doing the colorways a different path instead of straight across, like if you were doing them diagonally like Jeanette does in the book, which is really pretty. You know, or you're using variegated floss, it's really beautiful. So, these are quite pretty just on their own. Again, you know, just remember to keep in mind, if you do use these for something else, to keep that eye open. I know I keep saying that, but that's important with these. And so the eyelet, you know, it doesn't have to be 8 legs. It doesn't have to be over, you know, this whole eyelet's over 4 threads, but each leg's over 2. You can make it bigger. You could make it a little bit smaller, although it gets hard to do as you get smaller. I think you can just get a little bit smaller because this is over 2 threads. You could go over 1 thread. But it's still an eyelet. If you get bigger, you can change the shape of it and elongate the legs on the top and the bottom or the sides and make it more of a star shape than this little square eyelet. So, and sometimes people call them different things when you do that to them. It's still a type of an eyelet, so as long as you are always going into the center hole and it's got that, you know, it makes a little bit of a hole, it's still an eyelet. Now, you can do a star stitch that's not an eyelet by not going into the hole, where you're just covering, you know, the threads on the top and you're not diving into the hole. Then that's a star stitch and it's not an eyelet stitch. So there is that one out there too, which is not one that we're doing on this series of specialty stitches. And I haven't done a live stitch yet because I know a lot of you still don't have all your stuff. So I'm kind of waiting until we get the majority of folks with all of their things. And then we'll do a live video. And you can ask me some questions on that too. And you see how I'm counting that first leg. A lot of times I'm just finding the stitch beside it and counting over. That's if I have a stitch beside it. If I didn't, I would count up 2 and over 2. And you see when I'm counting, I poke the needle through the holes to help me count. And sometimes I poke it through because I don't know exactly where the needle is, so it helps me find it. 1, 2. One, two. I don't usually edit all this stitching out in the middle. Sometimes I'm talking to you and just telling you some things, and other times, you know, you might be stitching with me, and you can always fast forward if you need to. Otherwise, you know, we'll stitch together through this, although I might be going a little faster, a little slower than you. It's all good. Okay, so let's count that one. 1, 2, because it looks a little funny to me. So, you know, anytime it looks or feels a little weird, stop and check it. It's kind of the golden rule. Needlework is a very tactile thing, as well as visual. So you definitely are still touching, feeling everything on the back, just like me. And you're making sure that it looks, you know, consistent. Okay, and we know from the row above that we ended with a 1 thread margin, so we didn't have any compensating stitch. So for those of you on 28 count, if you don't have enough room to do a full eyelet, you can do half of an eyelet and end it, you know, like here. And in that case, you would have done this bottom leg as well when you started. You really can't do, little compensating stitches over here. So, you know, if you don't have a full eyelet, you can't, it looks weird to do like, you know, just a 1 thread stitch in there. You wouldn't do that. You would just do half and then leave it, and you'll just have a little open area there. And you see me do the wrong thing there, so I went to the wrong, came up at the wrong spot. I came in a thread. So we'll take that back out. I mean, I guess you could do that compensating thing. You can try it and see what you think. I don't know that I would love that look, but you can certainly try it and see what you think. It's turning out really pretty. Okay, so that's the last leg. Now we have to secure that last leg so that it stays taut and you don't lose your eye. You don't lose so you want to be coming down. You don't want to go up because then you'll cross over the eye. So you need to be coming down, and you need to secure it. And you can take it under the stitch beside it, which is kind of down and over, which is okay, because you see it went over a little bit, but that's okay because it's not covering that hole. And then you might want to do that again in the next stitch over, and just keep it down on the bottom. I think that's enough. If you want to run it through more, you can, but that looks pretty good to me. So that's your second band of eyelets, and this is what the back looks like. And so you can see it's nice and neat and tidy, and they all look good. There's nothing wonky going on there. You hardly even see where I buried the thread. I am going to finish off this away knot. Let's do that before we close out this little band. So again, we're going to snip him off the top, thread the needle, which might be a little bit of a challenge because it's a short little thread, so you might see me. I don't like to lick them, but sometimes it happens. When they get this short, which is exactly what I'm going to do. So it's not my favorite thing, but sometimes you just have to do it. And see, he went right in there. Okay, and I'm going to turn this around, and I want to keep it down on the bottom, remember, because we don't want to go over the eye. I'm going to run it under a few. Okay, and I didn't pull it real hard because I don't want to distort the stitch on the front. I'm going to cut that tail. Okay, so back still looks good. Front looks good. We're set to do the third row. Now, we're going to continue to do the third row just like we did the other two. But then when I show you a different application for the end, I'm going to do that stitch a different way. All right, so we're going to go ahead and do the third row in blue just like we did these two rows, and then when we go to a different application, which is what we've been doing with the other two videos, I'll show you something a little bit different. Okay, so we'll be right back. Okay, so we're ready to start the third band, and again we are going to leave a 1 thread margin on the left side. We're going to count down 1, 2, 3, 4 threads, and we're going to come up right there in that lower left corner. We're going to count up 1, 2 threads and 1, 2 threads, and that's the center of this eyelet stitch, and it should line up with the stitch center of the stitch above it, and it does. Then we're going to do the next leg, which is up 2 threads from where we started the last one. So 1, 2, and then over 2 to the eye. The next one is up 2 threads, 1, 2, which intersects with the stitch above it, and then over 2 and down 2 into the eye. So again, each leg of this stitch covers 2 threads. The full eyelet covers 4 threads. It's a 4x4 box for the full eyelet, but we're covering 2 threads with each leg, and it makes a pretty little thing. Okay, and then we're going to come down 2 threads from where you started the last leg, which is 1, 2, and then into the eye. Okay, down 2 threads, 1, 2. You're in the lower right hand corner now and into the eye. And again, if you're pulling on the stitch to make the eye open up a little bit, you want to do it as you come up, not as you're going down. There's a bunch of little dogs walking by outside right now. Okay. So the next stitch You want to keep the integrity of the last leg, so you want to keep it taut, which means you're going to stay, and you don't want to cover the eye, so you're going to come along the bottom. So you're going to start down here in the lower left corner, and you're going to go up 2 threads and over 2 threads and go down. Okay, up 2 threads and then down into the eye. Okay, over 2 threads, which is going to be the center of the stitch above it, and into the eye. Right. Okay, start the next stitch over here in the corner, and again, you're 2 threads up, 2 threads over to find the center of the eye, and then you're going clockwise around because we are traveling to the right. If we were traveling to the left, we would go counterclockwise, so we'd be ending on that side. But because we're traveling to the right, we want to go clockwise around the eyelet. Okay. And you see, I'm not pulling it too much. I'm not making too much of an eye. It's enough of an eye. I don't usually like to have mine really wide. The holes in the middle really wide. Not unless I'm intentionally doing it for some reason. I just it's hard to keep them consistent like that. So I like to find my tension, whatever it is, go with that so that it's consistently like that. In the event that I'm doing a whole bunch of them in different spots on different days, I just don't want to be struggling to get them all the same. So I try to just find where I'm moderately, consistently at and use that level of tension. And that's just something that's practice for you. And I will tell you, if you have it in a hoop or a Q-snap or some stitching apparatus versus stitching in hand, you will get better tension, especially with your eyelets. It's really tough to get a really pretty eyelet when it's not inside a hoop or a Q-snap or something like that, or stretcher frame, stretcher bars or something, scroll frame. That's why I wrapped this hoop before this lesson. I wanted this fabric to be taut throughout the whole lesson so that I didn't have to really struggle with the tension on these eyelets. So if you've not wrapped your hoop yet, no time like the present. So we did get a bunch of 3/8 inch twill tape in this week, and we sent it all out. So we've got more coming. So thank you guys for, just really responding the way you have to this series of stitches. I hope you're getting value out of it. I hope you finish it. I hope you go all the way through. Even if you don't finish it as I finish it, you can always come back to it. And I really hope you do. I think you'll enjoy learning these things. Next week's a little different stitch. I think it'll be fun. A little different. And then I'll get a little more different after that. So up 2 threads, in 2 threads. Some funky music out there. I don't know if you can hear that. Probably. And if your hand starts to bother you from holding your hoop, time to invest in a stand. And I will admit, somehow I injured my left hand sometime around that Germany trip, my wrist. I don't know if it was the finishing I was doing. I'm not as hardcore a finisher as Vanna or Faye, or if I did something else to it, but I can tell if I hold something the same way for a long time that I feel it in that wrist. It's not a good thing. So hopefully it gets a little better. It did get better for a little while. Now it's bothering me, so I may have to start using a stand myself for this. We shall see. But you should, if your wrist is bothering you, jump over to a stand where you're not holding your hoop like this. You can still use your non-dominant hand. That looks a little weird to me. I feel like that stitch right there must have slipped, so I'm going to undo this. I'm going to take this out and check this stitch out and see what happened here. It's in there. It's in the right spot. Just looks weird. For whatever reason. It's all in the right spot. I don't know. Just looks a little weird. So, I'll rethread. I'll let you watch me because I know you're mesmerized by that little trick. It's just a weird looking one. It's probably going to consistently look weird. It might be the way that the banding is pulled in here pretty tight, because I just pulled it a second ago. You saw me do it. That's the only time in this whole stitching session that I have tightened up this banding. That's the difference that this twill tape made. So you see me looking for the right hole there. It's important. Yeah, so anyway, back to the whole stand concept. If you need to use a stand, you need to use a stand, and you don't want to damage your wrist. You don't want to end up with carpal tunnel. And so if your wrist starts to hurt you, change your posture in your stitching position. Maybe you're doing something funny about how you're sitting, especially if you're new at this. You may be really tense while you're doing it. There's something going on maybe with how you're sitting or how you're holding it. Change a few things up, change your chair, see what you can get going on. If you're still having, some soreness and pain, then get yourself a little stand, a tabletop stand or a floor stand, and you use your other hand still on the back of that. You're just not having to hold the hoop while you do it, or whatever you're stitching in. And if you're not having any issues, then that's fantastic. Keep doing what you're doing. But don't, if you start to have some pain, you need to address that. You don't want to just push yourself, because it's not a good thing. It's not something you're going to work through. It's not like exercising a new muscle. Although I will say, if you're having, if your biceps or something are hurting from holding your hoop in a certain way, that will get better. That just means you are developing a muscle from holding your hoop. But if your wrists start to hurt, or your hand right in here, if that gets, funny, or your wrist starts to hurt, you might try taking off your watch or something like that, or changing your posture, doing something just a little different and seeing if that helps. Take a little break for a couple of days, but don't damage your body. Just correct the offending position is really all you need to do with that. It's pretty straightforward. Stands make all the difference if you really can't fix it with your posture or other things in terms of how you're sitting or how you're holding or whatever. Get yourself a stand. We sell some stands here. We're going to be bringing some more in. But you can, talk to your stitching buddies and find out what they like and why. Ask the question why. Vanna has had a lot of different stands, and I think she goes through favorites depending on what she's using them for, which makes a lot of sense. I tend not to use a stand unless I'm doing needlepoint. And then I use it because I need both hands free. And because my frame that I'm doing the needlepoint on is usually a lot bigger and a lot harder to deal with. It needs to be in a stand. I also use a stand with really large samplers because I'm using a scroll frame. And so I have a needle, I guess it's called Needle Necessities or something like that, the one that comes out of the UK. I have a scroll frame from him. I ordered a stand, but it's not gotten here. It's been a long time. And so my husband made me a tabletop stand, which is pretty similar. And I like that a lot. I use that. For floor stands, we sell Kay's Creations. I use a Needle System 4. I really like it at home. And Lowry's are good. So, those are all good makers. If you've got a chance to demo a few, try out your buddies at your next retreat. If you're not able to go visit a shop, give me a call. We'll have a talk. We'll figure out how you sit and what you do and which one might be best for you. So I'm just working around, I'm skipping 2 threads with every leg. I'm working around clockwise on each of these eyelets. And I'm tugging more on the upside, but I'm not pulling crazy tight. And then I'm always staying away from the eye when I start the next stitch. Again, that's probably the most important thing you do on these eyelets is not to cover up the eye on the back. It's easy to do. There have been a lot of times that I've been zooming along and stitching and look down and that eye is blinking. It's winking at me because I covered it up on the back. So that's why I keep harping on it. It's not because I don't think you didn't hear me. It's because it's an easy thing to do for anybody. So, and you want to find it early rather than late. So here's a trick. If you do make that mistake and you're way far away from it, you're too far away to go back. Like if you're more than, an eyelet away or 2 eyelets away, I have gone back and grabbed that thread on the back and tugged it away and anchored it over to the side. So the day is not lost if you accidentally do that to yourself. Trust me, you're in good company, but you don't have to leave it that way and you don't have to take everything out. You just weave your needle over there, start somewhere nearby or weave your needle over there, come up and grab that thread and pull it away from the eye, and then weave back under another leg nearby and anchor it somewhere away. And then you have moved it out of the eye on the back. So that is the way you fix that. Okay. I was going to try to show you how to make a mistake and fix it, but it didn't really work with such a small eyelet. So in this dark thread and dark fabric. So I'm going to show you when we do our other alternative application at the end. And so for this one, we're just going to finish this band out in the correct manner and in good form. And then I will show you a mistake and how to fix it on another stitch at the end so that you can see it. With this dark blue thread and this black linen underneath and these smallish eyelets, you couldn't see the error. And actually when I did it, I kind of, even though I was trying not to fix it on the back, I fixed it. So it didn't help. Yeah, mistakes are a lot better teaching tools when they're really mistakes. Okay, so that was the last leg of that stitch. I'm going to start down here in the lower left corner. Jump into the pool. We're still going clockwise. We're covering 2 threads with every leg. The eyelet itself, the full stitch, is a 4-thread eyelet. Okay. Getting close to the end. I hope this is all making sense for you guys. So up 2 threads, over 2 threads to find the center for the eye. Last eyelet. Up 2 threads, over 2 threads to find the center. Up 2 threads into the pool. Got a 1 thread margin over there. Just make sure it's consistent with where you ended the last specialty stitch, which we checked this in the beginning, and it is, and that is the last leg. So now we want to preserve the integrity of this last leg. We don't want to cross the eye, so we're going to flip this over on the back. We want to make sure we're coming toward the bottom because we ended on the bottom, and I'm going to leave that because that was our last stitch, and I'm going to run over here, the last leg of the last stitch. So it's okay, it did not cross the eye, and it's taut. I'm going to go underneath one more. So that's good. So that will finish us up for that. Now I got to deal with my away knot, my waist away knot. So I'm going to come over here. This is going to be a short thread because remember I didn't have a lot of fabric because this is banding, so starting down here. You saw me have to lick it to get it under the last time. Let's see what I can do this time. I think if I had my magnifier over here I could do it without doing that, but I'm getting blind as I get old. Look at that. Haha. Okay, so again, you know, we started from the bottom when we started this thing, if you remember. We want to stay on the bottom. We don't want to cross over the eye. So you see me running it along the bottom. It's pretty tight. These eyelets are tight, so. And if you ever find yourself where your stitches are too tight for you to run underneath it with the needle that you're using to stitch, you can switch to a smaller needle. So this is a 24. And if my stuff had been too tight for me to get this 24 under it without really piercing a thread or distorting the stitches on the front, I would have jumped over to a 26 needle and used the 26 to finish. And that is a trick for any stitching. So sometimes the finishing off is a little tougher because you've got tighter stitches. You can always switch to a smaller needle because the shaft will be smaller. The eye will also be a little smaller on most of them, which could be a problem with a flower thread or a single strand, but you might be able to get it through a 26 and you're just finishing, you're not running it through the eye over and over, so it won't matter if if it's not quite the best fitted eye for that thread, since you're just really going to be running it under and snipping it off. So don't be afraid to switch your needle to a smaller one to do finishing. Okay, so we're gonna stop. I'm gonna go to the other end of this banding where I've been showing you some other things. I'm gonna change thread. We're gonna come back and I'm gonna show you a different illustration. So just note the back of that. It looks nice and neat and pretty. You really can hardly even see where I ended the threads. The front's beautiful. It's a beautiful little stitch. I hope you enjoyed that Algerian eyelet, and stay with me and come back and let's see what we do with it next. Okay, welcome back. We're going to do a few eyelets in a row just so you can see how the variegated thread affects it. And then I'll show you some other stuff. So I've already got a waist away knot in here. I'm going to skip 1, 2, 3, 4. That's my margin. And then I'm going to come down 1, 2, 3, 4 threads more. 1, 2. Let's do that again. All right, so I missed a few threads. Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4. That's the margin. 1, 2, 3, 4. That's where I want to start. Okay. And I've already got a waist away knot in here, so now I'm just coming up 2 threads and over 2 threads and jumping in the pull to make the eyelet. So this first little group of stitches is just going to be me showing you how the color variation of a variegated floss or thread affects these eyelets. It's real pretty. And it's the same, you know, skipping 2 threads we were doing before, the same 8-legged little eyelet. Okay. And you may have been stitching with a variegated floss, so you may already have seen this, but for those people who are not, and of course the variegation of your floss has an impact on this too. Little knot right there. When you get a little loop knot like that, you just usually put the tip of your needle through it, pull it to where it's smaller, and then tug on it from both sides. It'll go away. Now sometimes if you have a crimped end like that, it's going to keep doing that, and you just want to snip it off for whatever reason. I don't know how those happen, but they do. If you snip those off, if they get like that, you'll get less of those. They just cause trouble. Okay. Now, remember from before that we came up, our last leg was right here, so we want to keep on the bottom to start the next stitch. We want to hold that integrity. Up 2 threads, over 2 threads, and into the center to make the eye. You see how pretty that raised stitch above was with its color changes. Now, we used a lot more thread on that raised stitch, so you saw the variegation a lot sooner than you are on this eyelet. We're going to do maybe one more after this one so that you can see it. Hopefully it'll come into play. I may be at a section where it's all light thread. And, you know, you're going to play with this stitch a little bit somewhere, and you're going to see what a difference it makes when you really tug on the thread coming up on the up stitch and widen up that eye some. Yeah, we're not going to see too much change until I make a whole row. But I think you get the idea. Let me see. Yeah. This thread doesn't change until back up in here. So, I think you get the idea. It would change as you go through there. It'll be real pretty. We'll do one more just to see. I don't think we've got enough change to do it though. So, if you've got a more heavily variegated, you'll see a lot more, just like you did with the ray. Starting to see a little bit now. Yeah, so it gets real pretty. It's getting a little darker. Okay. So, I think you get the idea of that. So that's your normal eyelet, and you see the little hole in there. You can actually see the holes better with this lighter color floss. You can see them pulling in it. And you see the last one I've not secured, so you can't see the eye as well. See how that eye is all discombobulated? So now if I pull that thread down as if I had secured it, you can see that eye, which is really great. Now, we're going to do this. We're going to skip over some. We're going to do the same stitch. I'm going to skip over 4 threads. Actually, I'm going to come down here. I'm going to come over 4 and down 4 just because I want you to see a different way to do it. And that secures that last leg on that one. Okay, so I'm going to do this same stitch, but I'm going to go around it twice and fill up more of the threads. So my first one's going to be up 2 threads and in 2 threads, right? So I'm going to do that this first pass the same way as we've done all these other eyelets. So up 2 threads. Ooh, sorry, I caught it. So I came up 2 threads and into the center, just like always. Up 2 threads, into the center, just like always. Over 2 threads, just like always. Into the center. And over 2 threads, giving it a little tug at the top, into the center. Okay, I'm coming down the side now, so I'm coming down 2 threads. Into the center. Down 2 threads. Into the center. Over 2 threads. I'm pulling on the upswing and into the center. Okay, that would typically be our last stitch. Well, we're going to fill in these other threads that we've been skipping. So from there, I'm going to come over 1 thread. This is our second pass. And into the center. And then I'm going to skip 2 threads, which is going to be the center of these other 2 stitches from the first one we made. So it's over a thread and up a thread on this one. I'm filling in the gaps and into the hole, right? And I'm going to fill in the gap where we left this thread open. And I'm pulling on the up part so you can see the eye and into the hole, right? Same thing, up a thread, over a thread. This was an empty hole. I'm still going clockwise, so I'm not covering that eye on the back. Okay, come over 2 threads to that empty hole. Pull it on the upswing. Jump back in the pool. This one I'm coming over a thread and down a thread. That's an empty hole. Tugging on the upside, back into the pool. And then come down 2 threads to the empty hole and jump back in the pool. Okay, then down 1 thread and over 1 thread to get to this empty hole. This is going to be the last stitch now because every other hole is filled, and back into the pool. Now, that last leg still has to get secured. So I'm going to pull it down here while we talk. But you see that's a different, it's still an eyelet. It's still a really pretty thread. So I'm going to put the banding behind it. Now you can see that white. You can see the eye of it. Very pretty. And so that is filling all of the different threads. So you see the different look? So this is a 8-legged eyelet. And this fills up all of the holes. So, you know, that's an option for you. You can do it a different way. So let's jump down and let's do another variation. Okay, so this, let's do one more of the ones that we just did so that you can see that. So I'm going to still jump down though. I'm going to come down 1, 2, 3, 4 threads. 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm going to do this on a diagonal. So that secures the last leg of that one. So I'm going to do that same thing again just to show you that. So it's up 2 threads, over 2 threads to make the eye. Remember the first pass of this is just like all the other eyelets we did. Up 2 threads and into the center to make the eye. Up 2 threads, into the center to make the eye. over 2 threads, just like all the others that we did. There's 3 rows. Pull on the up swing into the center to make the eye, over 2 threads, into the center to make the eye, down 2 threads, into the center to make the eye, down 2 threads, into the center to make the eye, down 2 threads, and into the center to make the eye. Okay, that'd be pretty if I left that one like that and came down here and did another one that I filled all in. That would be really pretty. Let's do it. Okay, so let's leave that one like it is because it'll be pretty like that. Let's come down 4 threads. 1, 2, 3, 4. We're going to do another one just like the last one. Okay, up 2 threads and in 2 threads to make the eye. Up 2 threads, in 2 threads to make the eye. Up 2 threads, in 2 threads to make the eye, over 2 threads, into the center, over 2 threads, into the center, down 2 threads, into the center, down 2 threads, you're in the corner now, into the center, over 2 threads, pulling on the upswing. Okay, so this would normally be the last leg. It would look just like that one and just like these, into the center, but it's not going to be the last leg. Now we're going to fill in the empty holes. So I'm going to come over 1 thread. I'm still going to go clockwise so that I'm not covering up the eye. Over 1 thread, into the hole. All right. Come over a thread and up a thread to that empty hole, and go into the eye. The next one's going to be up 2 threads to the empty hole, pull it on the upswing, into the eye. Okay. This one is up a thread and over a thread to the empty hole, pull it on the up tug, into the eye. Over 2 threads to the empty hole, pull it on the upswing and into the eye. Over a thread and down a thread to the empty hole, pull it on the up tug, into the eye. Down 2 threads to the empty hole, pull it on the upswing, into the eye. Down 1 thread, over 1 thread to the empty hole, pull it on the upswing, into the eye. Okay, and now I'm just going to hold that taut on the back till we end that thread so that you can kind of see where we are. Okay, so that made a really pretty little design, and you can see you can do lots of fun stuff with these eyelets. Like I said, you can make letters. A lot of antique samplers have letters in them. Hardanger has these eyelets in it. Just, you can make some of the eyelets. Sometimes they decorate, what would be called caskets, which are boxes that are then covered in embroidery. I mean, they're just very beautiful when you play around with them, and especially if you're using a variegated floss, and you can just do tons and tons of things. It's real pretty. So why did I make 2 passes instead of getting each thread as I went? Because it looks better. It just flat out looks better. Don't ask me why. It just does. Probably the threads just lay better. It just has to do with the tension of where you go next on the back, and that's true of all stitches. The front is very much impacted by what you're doing on the back, and so making that consistent, circle around on the back and then doing it again makes the front lay really nice and look consistent. And so that's why I make 2 passes instead of picking up each thread as I go. And you're welcome to experiment with that. And I think you'll find the same thing, that if you make 2 passes around rather than doing it at one time, it's just a more beautiful outcome. It just looks better. It's kind of like, eventually we'll do some satin stitches. We'll do some satin stitches in this series, but we won't be doing this kind, but if you're doing satin stitches, like let's say, for example, in this here brazier sampler where you've got big borders of satin stitches, sometimes you make 2 passes with a single thread instead of using 2 threads to make a pass. It just impacts how the stitch lays. And what's happening on the back gives strength and durability and beauty to what happens on the front. And so that's why we do 2 passes with that. So that's a really pretty application. I want to show you an elongated eyelet that would be more of a star. And then I want to show you how to fix an error if you've accidentally caused your eye to blink and you've gone over the back of your eye. So remember, I'm down at the bottom down here, so just to keep us, on the straight and narrow, I'm going to come down again, so I'm not having to run that leg under on the back, but I'm going to come down probably 6 threads this time. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and I'm going to come down 8, 7, 8, and I'm going to come over 1, 2 threads on this one. Okay, so you see I maintain the integrity of the eye of that last stitch. You can see on the white now you don't see any thread behind it because of the way I handled it on the back. Okay, so the first leg is the same. Now, to do the second leg, I would normally come up 2 threads. Well, I'm going to come up 2 threads and then jump out 2 more threads so that the second leg actually covers 4 threads. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then back into the middle. Okay. Now, this next one is going back to its normal 2 threads. So up 2 threads, over 2 threads. It's half the length of that one that you just did. Okay. Then to get the fourth one, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. It's over 4 threads. And it goes back into the middle and you kind of pull it. Okay. To get the next one, it's over 2 threads and up 2 threads. It's the same size as the ones that we always did. Back into the middle and you pull it. The next one is going to be out for 4 threads from the center. 1, 2, 3, 4. And you're still going clockwise and you're still tugging on the upswing, right? Okay, this one is going to be a normal one. So from the center, let's walk down 2 threads and over 2 threads. Okay. Back into the center. And this last leg from the center, we're going to come out 4 threads. 1, 2, 3, 4. Counted that really poorly. Let's do that again. 1, 2, 3, 4. Pull it on the upside and then bring it back down. And so that looks more like kind of like a little star. And so that might be something that you would use if you were making a star, like on a manger scene or, something else like that, or you wanted to put stars in the sky. That looks like a big star. You could do a little one for a little star, but you can see how you can manipulate that. So just to kind of review that, the 4 shorter legs were your normal eyelet legs, and then you jumped out 2 threads to make these longer legs on that part of it. Now, we still have to secure this thread on the back so that it doesn't go anywhere, but to keep from doing that, I'm going to come down here and, I don't want to end the thread. I'm just going to come down some. So I'm going to come down in here somewhere because I want to try to make a mistake that we can fix. And I don't know if I'll be able to get it to work. I'm going to do a bigger eyelet. Instead of just doing it over, 4 threads or 2 threads on each leg, I'm going to do 4 threads on each leg. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so that's my first leg. Then I'm going to count up 1, 2, 3, 4. It's my second leg, and I'm pulling on the upswing. 1, 2, 3, 4. Pulling on the upswing. 1, 2, 3, 4. So I'm basically just making this one twice as big as all the others that we've made, because I want you to be able to see the thread on the back. 1, 2, 3, 4. Let's count that again. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then down 4 threads. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then 1, 2, 3, 4. And then over 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, that's the last leg. Okay, so you can clearly see that hole on here now. There's nothing behind it, right? So, and you can kind of see my finger through it. Now, what if I go over that hole? So let's say I wanted to start up here. There we go. Now it's straight across. So you can sort of see it now back there behind it. I'm just trying to get it to where you can see it. So I'm going to do a little eyelet up here just so this is secure. So I'm going to do a normal eyelet. 1, 2, 1, 2. Just your normal, regular, everyday little eyelet. Okay. Alrighty. And I'm going to run this under on the back so that I've got it secured. And that's what you might do if you were carrying on to another stitch. You would just run it under onto the back. Okay, so now that hole, you can see there's nothing back there on that hole. This one has a thread going right across the middle of it. And let's say that we just noticed that. So we need to fix it. So the way to fix it is to come back down here and come to it from one side or the other. So let's come down here and let's weave under these legs of this eyelet so that now I'm going to pick this thread up and pull it over out of my way. And I'm going to take it, I'm going to weave down underneath these other threads. Okay. And if it's not completely out of my way, I can grab it again and pull it over out of my way. And take it over here. Now, you can see that full eye on the back. If you turn it over to the front, that thread is gone. It is not shown on the front. Now, you see, because we really yanked on these other legs when we were weaving under, it kind of distorted them a little bit. And that is kind of a little bit of the risk you run. This was a big, loose eyelet because it was over so many threads to illustrate it. If you had a smaller eyelet, I don't think you would disturb them like that. But I just wanted to show you that if you do find yourself a long way away and you've got, you know, something on the back that covers that eye, you can go down there coming from whatever direction you need to. Try not to disturb those legs like I did on the front. You would probably have a row or you'd have something else going. And you're just going to grab that thread and pull it over out from behind the eye. That's all you really have to do. So, and you see I made a really big eye there so that you could see it. That's actually too big of an eye for most cases. If you were going to have an eye that big, you'd probably be weaving something through it. So that's not your typical everyday kind of pretty eyelet. But anyway, I think you get the idea of how to make that repair. And you see how pretty this eyelet is if you're doing these kind of guys up here and just doing a variegated floss. So the eyelet has a lot of application. It's just a really pretty stitch. I hope you learned a little bit about how to do it today. I hope you enjoyed it. I'm going to show you the other side again, just so you have that kind of in your memory. And this was the other ones that we did, and you can see how pretty they are. So I hope you enjoyed that. Thank you for joining us. We will be back. We may not be back exactly 1 week from today, because we will be coming back from the Nashville Needlework Market for this year, but we will be back the week after that. So I hope you enjoy it, and if you haven't gotten your supplies yet, just hang tight. They're coming, and just enjoy the stitch. Thanks a lot for joining. Bye.